Well, good evening, card chargers, and welcome back to the channel. Just an amazing lot of things to share of love from the community. I felt this last week. Amazing number of shout outs from so many wonderful channels and just great people. Just very thankful. It's just so many to remember. Just know those of you that have, I really appreciate you. I appreciate your viewership. Everyone that continues to watch my videos and is subscribed to my channel and comments. I just really appreciate it so very much. So thank you. Tonight, this episode won't take too much time, I hope. But we're going to do a sort of a kind of a Fab Four of maybe a what could have been of a player that's vintage player that I never got to see play, and was, I mean, he died probably when I was 4, maybe 5 or 6 years old. So never got a chance to meet him or possibly get an autograph, even though just meeting him would have been really cool. But they named a big red smoky sausage after him at Old Riverfront Stadium, known as the Big Klu. But he's more than just a dog in a bun. He might have been, for a stretch, possibly the greatest Reds first baseman and greatest Reds player ever. So we're going to do a 4-card run. I'm going to talk a little bit about him. Theodore Bernard Kluszewski was born on September 10th, 1924 in Argo, Illinois. And the Reds spotted Ted in 1945 because during the war they weren't going to Florida to train at the University of Indiana. I'm reading this off the back of his 52 Topps card, which I'm going to show you in a second here, which is incorrect because it's Indiana University, but that's okay. He was a All-American tight end on the IU football team, and back in those days, IU had a little bit of a era of dominance in the late 40s that they would briefly revisit in the late 60s and never really had much sense. They were a really good team back then. For him to be an All-American, that's something else. And for him to be a tight end, that means he was quite, and here is his 52 Topps. He was quite the athlete. It's not going to stay in there very well. Let's switch out stands now. That's okay. Sorry, King Griffey Jr. Try to keep you in there some. Okay, so there it is. 52 Topps. That is my first 52 Topps card I've ever gotten. I only have a couple of 52 Topps cards, but that's a very special card to me. And just really pleased to have it. It's been in my collection a long time. But anyway, let's move on here. Ted showed a lot of promise when he first came up, but it wasn't quite a done deal. He was offered before he finished graduating from college, and he wanted to graduate from IU and get a degree and finish with the football team. And so they waited. The Reds waited for him. And when he first came up, his first year was a little rough, but beginning in 1951, to improve his batting average, Ted had his wife take movies of his swing. So he's predating, a guy like Tony Gwynn, or I think he mostly was videoing pitchers though, but he also videoed his swing to watch it. He's predating guys doing that. They were doing it today. And at home, Ted studied his films and found out the mistakes he made. The next year, in 1952, Big Klu not only corrected these mistakes, but jumped his average from 259 to 320. That's an amazing feat. And you really can't tell on this card here, but I'll get up a little closer for you for a second. You can see the big arms. I got another card that'll show that a little bit more here coming up. But you can see his big arms there. he was just known as being just one huge guy. He stood pretty tall. He was 6'2", weighed 225. Here's his 53 tops. I really like this card. This year card. And 53, kind of a shout out to my friend Drew at Clean Cheap Shots. He's doing a thing on 53 tops of the non-Hall of Fame players. He's going through every one of those, and it's been really interesting to watch. I look forward to what he says about Big Klu at some point, but the Tedster was just starting to come to his own there. And that season in 1953 is when he really started to take off. He batted .316, he hit 40 home runs, 25 doubles, slugged .570. Okay, in the next 3 seasons, you're going to see a repeating theme here. 28 doubles in 54, 49 home runs, batting .326, slugged .642, 1955, 25 doubles, 47 home runs. Oh, slug slipped a little bit, back to .585. He's back, in normal Hall of Fame range, while batting .314. 1956, batted 14 doubles, so the doubles are dropping off some, and still 35 home runs. He played only 100 games that season or so, I think. I'm going to check that again. 1956, 138 games. So he missed some games. He still slugged .536 and batted .302. That stretch of 4 years, that's like Gehrig type numbers. And what happened? Well, here's his 54 tops. I really like this one too because this 54 is a classic set, and this one is super nice, pretty well centered, and he's smiling. And I don't think very many of his cards he's smiling, and I'm not sure he was the happiest of guys. He didn't seem like he was during the time he was. Try to keep these in the shot. During the time he was playing, but you never know. You never know the full story of what's going on with players back then. But I really like it that he's smiling. I like cards where the players are smiling and stuff. It's this guy, that stoic look. That's just classic look. Well, opening day of 1957, as he told it later on, he was making a routine play. I mean, he's a first baseman. He was just making a routine play at back at the bag, and he felt something pop or move or do something weird in his back. And probably speculating he totally slipped a disc, or he suffered some sort of lower spinal injury that just completely robbed him of his power. And he was just never the same after that, for the most part. So that year in 1957, he only played in 69 games. He tried to play through the pain. He would come back, and his manager at the time accused him of being lazy. I guess, you didn't really talk about injuries back then because you could lose your job, I suppose. He tried to tough it out and play through it. But he only hit 6 home runs and batted only .268, which is 21 RBIs. The previous 4 years he'd driven in, almost 500 runs. So this is a market decline, a market shift, and the Reds just saw it as a player that no longer had any use for them. And I'm sure they're not the only team that did this, but they quickly moved him off. In '58, they traded him to the Pittsburgh Pirates for their first baseman, who I can't remember, hoping to maybe spark each other's careers. And I do not have a 58 tops of his, but I do have his 59 tops. Here he is, looking like he's putting one in the seats. Just a super neat card. You can definitely see his muscles there a little bit more. I want to show a card in his nether, and in the back of this shows wow, it says he holds 300 mark for all 4 All-Star games he played in. It says on the back of the card, Ted is still fighting a spinal injury. He talked later about it a little bit when his career was over and said, I could have maybe had surgery, but he decided to go against that. Surgery back then was no guarantee, and it was always a chance that things could be made worse. So I don't know. Hopefully he made that decision based on his life first. So I think that's, in hindsight, probably the best decision. But what could have been? What could have been? Well, I'll leave you on this note. He only played for the Pirates in 1958 for about half a season, and guess who acquired him in a trade later in the season? None other than the 1959 Go-Go Sox. I should have pulled out some White Sox cards to show, and I wish I had a card of him with the White Sox. Would have really liked to have his 60 Topps card with the White Sox, but I don't have any of those later cards. And here's the silver lining. Obviously, the White Sox were on their way to making the World Series, which they did. And probably if Ted had been injured, or hadn't had that injury and stayed with the Reds, he might have never seen postseason play. I mean, it's possible he could have been with the Ragamuffin Reds in the late 60s, the early 60s, in 61, 62, but who knows? It's hard to say. So in that World Series, though, sort of like the last go around for Roy Hobbs, he had an amazing series where he hit 3 home runs. That power came back in a bit. He batted .391 and accounted for batting in 10 of the 22 runs scored total for the whole series by the White Sox. Which they scored 11 in the first game. In Game 1, they blew the Dodgers out in Chicago. Big part because of Ted Kluszewski, and he torched Roger Craig for a 3rd-inning home run deep down the right field line, and then he came up again, and I guess Craig was chased, and he took, in the 4th inning, took Chuck Cherndeep down the right field line for his second of the series. And he was kind of quiet in games 2 and 3. In game 4, he kind of woke up again. He went 2 for 4 with 2 intentional base on balls pitched to him by no other than the guy he took deep in the first game, Roger Craig. So clearly, Dodgers management wasn't thinking about anything about letting him have a chance, even in, pitcher-friendly LA. Well, no, they're probably still playing the Coliseum then. So yeah, that might have been a smart decision. Game 6 back in Chicago, he went 2 for 4 with a double and took Johnny Padres deep in the 3rd inning, yet in a losing cause, as they just couldn't quite get over the hump. But overall, quite a career, but he wasn't quite yet done. 1961 was his final season in the big leagues, and he was playing for the new expansion LA Angels. And in just 107 games, he hit 15 home runs, slugged .460, batted .243 with 12 doubles, 24 walks. That sounds like a lot of players today. That's a really good season. And here he is, not much left in the tank, but some of that power returned for Ted, and I think that's just a really neat story. But let's put this in perspective. If you don't believe me on those 53 to 56 stats, let's look at his strikeouts. He struck out in 53 34 times, 35 times in 54, 40 times in 55, and just 31 times in 56, which means in all 4 of those years, he hit more home runs than he struck out. I'll let that sink in. As I'm heading for the highway, I'm going to saddle up. Thank you for watching. If you made it to the end of this video, I really appreciate it. And such a neat story of Ted Kluszewski. Until next time.